accidental getting bumped or something, can we get a bigger cover over that? The AED that's back there?
The accidental electric shock.
It looks like a giant push button.
It's that easy button. Ready? Okay. At this time, we will call to order the City of Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for August 25th, 2021. Will you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, item A2, roll call, please.
Chair Twait,
Here?
Commissioner Halstead,
Here?
Commissioner Woodard,
Here.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Here.
Commissioner Duffett,
Here.
Commissioner Springer,
Here.
Vice Chair Fikes.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Item A3, agenda approval. Wishes of the commission. Vice Chair Fikes.
Make a motion, we approve the agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any objections? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Item A4, consent agenda. Vice Chair Fikes.
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
And a second.
Second for
Commissioner
approval of
Dothett.
consent agenda as presented.
All right. Any objections? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Item C, scheduled public comment. We have none. Item D, unscheduled public comment. Anyone wishing to speak to an item not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to items E, consideration of plats, F, public hearings, and G, unfinished business. We have none. Takes us to item H, new business. H1 for action approval is a recommendation for ordinance number 3237-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund, the Land Administration Department, to provide funding for the Kenai Waterfront Revitalization Feasibility Study. Can I get a motion? Vice Chair Fikes.
I make a motion that we approve new business action approval item recommendation for an ordinance number 3237-2021.
And a second.
I get a second on that.
All right,
Action approval.
staff report.
Thank you, Chair Twait and fellow commissioners. Again, this is on Ordinance 3237-2021, appropriation to fund a Kenai Waterfront Revitalization Feasibility Study. And since this is our only item on tonight's agenda, I thought if we could take a little bit of time to discuss it, kind of a early days of what could be, I think, a really significant feasibility study for the community. So as I noted at the last meeting, there was a work session with council on August 4th on the topic, and really it was kind of a discussion with members of the community. Commissioner Woodard was there and spoke at the meeting. There was property owners, members of the community, and really getting a lot of just feedback on the overall idea of revitalization of the waterfront. And I think I mentioned at the last meeting as well is the 2016 comprehensive plan specifically includes goals and objectives for revitalizing the waterfront. I believe it's really the only specific area called out in that comprehensive plan on a focus area for redevelopment, revitalization, for new economic development incentives, and really to take a fresh look at the waterfront, knowing that when it comes to the commercial fishing, which had been historically the predominant use there, is to take a fresh look at it and reconsider what the waterfront could be. And I think from my perspective as a planner, as well as a new member of the community, I do think waterfront and revitalization does really, from a planning perspective and economic development perspective, really just it makes a lot of sense to take a look at this and take a look at it at this time at this particular juncture. Now, there's a lot of case studies out there across the country where communities have utilized waterfront redevelopment as a catalyst for, really significant change in communities. Whether you're talking about, San Antonio, Riverwalk, or I lived in Washington, D.C. for a better part of a decade and saw the waterfront where they built the new national stadium there. It was all industrial lands and vacant lands, and now today it's an entire new part of the city, and really acted as a significant catalyst. Or thinking about waterfront in Seattle. I mean, just the list goes on of communities big and small, to really take a look at their waterfronts, ocean, lakes, rivers, and so on, and see how that could be improved upon and really create an asset for the community. And I think from a planning perspective as well, there's something about people, through human nature, people are drawn to water, and I think for the city of Kenai to have that kind of asset in a central location in the city, I think from a planning perspective, it's well worth the opportunity to take a further look at it and hopefully have a feasibility study explore this more as well. So this ordinance, so this is actually going to hearing on September 1st for this ordinance, and there will be an RFP with a scope of services that'll be going along with it. So it wasn't in this packet. It is still being worked on even at this week. But I just wanted you to be aware that that will be a part of the packet for the council meeting on September 1st, where it's a draft request for proposal along with the draft scope of services. So there's just a lot more detail on what essentially the city would be asking the consultant to do. And specifically, putting an RFP out, on the street to have consultants, put in proposals. And let's see here. So currently it is and actually let me note here on page, just anybody interested in more detail, on page 15 is that ordinance 3237/2021, and so it's put in for $95,000 to hire a consultant on board. Now I would say the other thing that's interesting about this potential feasibility study and about revitalizing or redeveloping the waterfront is it's likely to be kind of a multidisciplinary approach, in the sense that it's certainly going to look at land use and planning, and I think it's also going to look at economic development and economic development tools and incentives and so on. So I just want to kind of give you a bit better of an idea of what that feasibility study might be focusing on. It's not just vision, it's not just land use, it's not just economic development, but it's really kind of all of those things. Let's see here, and so just a few other items before really. I just thought I just have a handful of questions to kind of pose to the commission, and thought we could have a bit of a conversation or answer questions. You can see on page 14, this is included in the packet on both August 4th and I believe August 18th to council. And so this is actually a nice little one-page kind of breakdown of that consideration for a feasibility study, so that purpose of the study for economic development, community, improvements, what those elements could be. So to look at market conditions, look at opportunities, constraints, to work with the consultant will be working directly with the community to develop that vision and goals and specific concepts and recommendations that they'd have for the city, as well as an implementation plan to say, okay, when this study is done, I've worked on a lot of these studies myself, professionally, as a private consultant in creating them, as well as project management on the municipal side of things. And I've worked on a lot of these types of studies, and kind of one of the worst things is to get a great study and a great plan and to have it sit on a shelf. And so really it would be I would hope get some really concrete recommendations from the consultant, as well as an implementation on how to move this forward. And I think that's another thing I just sort of wanted to mention the commission. This is really early days. These types of projects for redevelopment. Redevelopment is a very it's really difficult. It's more sophisticated and sort of difficult and kind of multidisciplinary than a greenfield development, right? If you just have a farm field and you're looking to do a develop, you're kind of almost starting from scratch in a way, as opposed to if you already have something there, like we do on the waterfront here. Oftentimes it can it can take several years to actually see improvements, see results, see something change or come out of the ground, so to speak. So some of these key questions at this stage, really early, is what's that community's vision, and so I think we started having that conversation, with the community, with the council, with private property owners at that work session, and I fully expect that if we were to move forward on a feasibility study, there'd be more conversations regarding that vision and the potentiality of the waterfront. How does redevelopment of this area fit in the community's goals and objectives? We've gotten a lot of existing goals and objectives, in the community. Certainly thinking of just from the comprehensive plan alone. What types of uses are most appropriate, for this area, and how can the city best support revitalization of the area? So these are kind of big picture questions that we'd be exploring further if we were to move forward on a feasibility study. There's a little map here as well that just shows a study area here. It's approximately 160 acres. 22 of those acres are what we call tidelands, and you can actually see them here, the specific parcels here along the waterfront. All of this study area is zoned heavy industrial, so that's certainly something that would probably be explored and considered zoning, and what other tools, land use wise or economic development wise, might be a best fit for the waterfront. State maintained road, that's always important to note that already we've got another potential stakeholder to be involved with this project. There is city sewer and water that I'm sorry.
Did I miss it? Which stakeholder is going to be?
Oh, I was just saying that because it's a state maintained road that goes along the full length of the study area, certainly when you're thinking of access points and future development, that they would very likely be included. Yeah. There is city water and sewer that goes down bridge access, so that's definitely pretty critical thinking about future development. We're not in a part of the city that doesn't have those types of public facilities. There's natural gas, electric, and there are some city assets and lands at the city dock there. And then certainly there's I'd say primarily private property within the study area as well. So just another consideration for this type of study. just a couple other points. One is I think if this project was to move forward in putting out an RFP and getting a consultant on board, I think it's sort of natural to have the Planning and Zoning Commission to be involved at some level, even if it's just to be periodically updated. I would even say to be directly involved is often very reasonable. I would say I'd leave it up for the commission for yourselves to sort of decide. But certainly I've worked on similar types of projects that I've considered the commission to be involved, and we just always would be clear on whether we need to put out a notice of quorum or something like that if you were to come to a design workshop or something along those lines. And also just thinking that there could be a lot of recommendations, implementation plan, action items that could come in front of the commission as well. So there could be, as already noted, it's all heavy industrial, depending on what that kind of vision is. Could be to take a look at the zoning. Is it rezoning? Is it to create an overlay district or so on? Really just trying to say that as the project moves forward, there's just a greater potentiality for the commission to be involved in specific action items. So just kind of wanted to mention that and just to have you be aware of that. And so the question is, does the commission recommend council approve the appropriation to fund a Kenai waterfront revitalization feasibility study? And then I think sort of that other question that I have is, what are your visions for what the waterfront could be? Do you have thoughts, ideas? It's like I said, it's early days, but I think at this stage there's a lot of interest to have these ideas and visions and kind of come forward from a wide range of stakeholders. And so I'll leave it at that, and happy to stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. I've got one to start with, I guess. So it looks like, I guess council identified the boundaries of this, or was it just randomly done through administration? And I'm curious, just as far as going north and west from there, the area that's there is relatively, I guess, stable as far as the bank goes. As you go a little further, it's going to be part of that bank restoration area probably. So will there be, as we see something happening there and we see some stabilization, will we want a master plan up into that area too as well? Or I'm curious about that.
Yeah, Chair Twit. I mean, that's a really good question. I would say this is actually staff and myself who put together. I'd call this maybe a draft study area. I'd say part of the reason why it looks like it does, at this stage is based on the zoning and sort of the contiguous aspect of the zoning that's there along the waterfront. I think it's all those existing uses that are on the waterfront as well. The further you go south, the less I think potential there is for probably development,
Investment,
sort of period. But I think what you mentioned about, and so what I would say is I don't feel like this is probably set in stone at this point. But that, let's say even if this was the study area and there was a feasibility study and a consultant firm came on board, there's always consideration of how this as a redevelopment and revitalization area would connect to other parts of the city. It might not go into super detail, but I think just purely the fact that very close by is sort of the downtown core, of the city, to think about something as simple as connectivity in the feasibility study itself would be pretty important to
Right.
to consider. So I think the other part of it is in considering the study area is to consider a study area that would be manageable,
Right.
and probably have the most that most impact. I would say 160 acres, and even 138 of that not being kind of tide land, sort of not really developable, is a pretty significant size. I think even if it was this study area that was to move forward, I think there's always considerations about how it's connecting to other parts of the city, especially being close to downtown. And I would just say I think at this stage there could be potential future discussions about making changes to the
Yeah.
study area as well.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't think there'd be anybody knocking the door down, going up towards where the bank issue until we see some action there that shows that it's being established and secured up there. But okay, that's all I got. I guess anyone else?
Yes.
Commissioner Halstead. Oh, Mr. Springer next.
Okay.
Commissioner Halstead, go ahead.
Okay. Several questions. I think I just echo kind of your concerns too. Is one of the first things I thought about was if we're doing the bluff erosion project, to utilize some of our efforts while we've already got dirt movers in there and potentially making a road that would open up the older town Kenai to the newer prospects. Whether it be storefronts or just like you said, an easier access road would be a fairly nice add-on to that. When you talked with some of the property owners in there, I know some of them have been there quite some time. Have you had any kind of pushback? Has it been a fairly positive response as far as, this is what we want to do? What do you think?
Through the chair, Commissioner Halstead, I'd say the conversations have been limited. I guess I'd say there were members of the community that came to the work session that spoke, and I do believe at least 2 or more were property owners within the draft study area. I would say that the conversation largely from both the property owners and others that spoke on that evening for the work session were actually really positive in the sense of being interested in exploring the potential for revitalization, for improvement to the waterfront. And I think a lot of members of the community that spoke understood that it's an asset to the community today. I mean, it's certainly both functional, but also it's a beautiful, special place, and I think that was something that a lot of folks had mentioned in their comments. So I'd say at this point there haven't been a lot of conversations, but I'd say from what I've heard, they've been really positive and interested in the potential. But certainly, a part of a feasibility study is going to have outreach to the community, outreach to as many interested stakeholders as probably possible, and probably I would think probably multiple opportunities for members of the public and stakeholders to participate and weigh in and be a part of the process.
Yeah, I think the project itself is a fantastic opportunity for the growth of Kenai, and I would fully support it. Some of these questions are a little more negative than the others. With the economic climate is as it is now an appropriate time to be looking at that sort of revitalization project versus, internal infrastructure or preparing for a potential lull in finances?
Through the chair, Commissioner Halsted. I mean, I think that's an interesting question, and I think that could be, a question that could be explored, in the study. I would say I certainly, being new to the community, I don't know enough about the waterfront, even as a planner, to probably even weigh in. But I think it's a valid question, to consider.
Yeah, I think always a positive look towards the future is great, but some prudence would be good.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, and that's another thing that a consultant would do with the community is, it's not just looking at opportunities, but also looking at constraints, like what could constrain a redevelopment of the waterfront. So I don't think it's always to just focus on the cheery and what wouldn't this be fantastic, but also to look at realistic obstacles.
Is this something that the Corps of Engineers would get involved in as well? Because it is the waterfront, do we need to, I know there was issues with the erosion project getting involvement with them and delays. Is that something we need to focus on or be aware of?
Through the chair, Commissioner Halsted, again, I'm probably not familiar enough to be able to answer the question. I would say in the feasibility study, oftentimes that depending on the study, you end up with numerous stakeholders. Whether they be one, I'm not sure. I don't know enough. I don't know enough about the river and the waterfront and the Corps' role here. I just don't know. But certainly thinking of potential stakeholders. I guess here's the other thing too: is the feasibility study is really about feasibility of how to move forward. And so even if, let's say, they weren't a stakeholder at this stage, there's potential to have stakeholders at additional stages if a project was to move forward. There's a little bit of a unknown factor about what even the feasibility study would say. I mean, you could probably hazard some guesses, sure, but it's also why we do the study too, right?
Yeah, I could be a little premature on some of my questions here. So another one, are we taking, they have the Cannery Road project came to us I'm sorry, Bob, I know you really have a question you want to ask. I got one more after this and I'll be done. The Cannery Road project, they did a lot of studies and obviously planning to get their project started. Is there anything from that we could glean? Would that be a good source that we could start with and see what they've done and what their thoughts were and moving forward on that? Because it seems it's a smaller slice of land there, but kind of a similar type of renovation that they're doing. Is that something that we could benefit from?
Through the chair, Commissioner Halsted, I would think so. I mean, certainly there are different considerations even based on location, sure, where, here kind of, co-location with downtown, with sewer and water being here specifically, as well as having, a state, a state highway here as well, kind of does differentiate it from the Kenai Landing side. But I still think in some ways, that project is looking to capitalize on, the waterfront as being a special place, in the community. And so I would think there's probably some things to learn and it could be, especially timing wise, it could be, depending on how far that project goes, there could even be more, kind of learning opportunities, just based on where they are and knowing we're hopefully going to be just doing starting a feasibility study, right? And they have a PUD, approved and moving forward. So yeah, I think there are some similarities and some kind of, focus, areas or sort of elements that project considering along the waterfront. That would probably be, similar things explored here, to capitalize on having people be able to spend more time in a beautiful place in the city.
So at this time, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time, Commissioner Springer.
You read my mind. That's exactly what I was thinking. Commissioner Springer.
Yes, you kind of answered some of my questions, but what I was going to comment on and ask is, since most of this land is privately owned, is the feasibility study going to provide some avenue to approach these landowners, these private property owners, in terms of what they can do or what can be done for them to develop this area?
Through the chair, Commissioner Springer. Yeah, I think so, and I think that and something that a consultant team would probably be able to help with, and again, it's probably a multidisciplinary, consultant team, probably, planning, economic development, and so on. I'm thinking, theoretically here, could have recommendations and proposals on how to do, a public-private type partnership and what that might look like. Just knowing that there are only that, again, majority of this is, privately held properties. And so I do think that would be a part of the study and part of the conversation. So even just thinking about things of having city services, coming up to, this study area and potentially being a part on redevelopment, I would think, part of their recommendations would be, how best to have, the public side play, their role, and then the private property owners also play their role. So I would expect that to be a recommendation, a part of the study. I think other things too is to look at to look at other tools. So certainly when thinking about planning or zoning, that could be something that could be on the public side of things, or sometimes development incentives, things like that. So I think it's right now, I think there's potentiality. I don't know exactly what it would be, but I expect the consultant firm to assist the community, the city, and these property owners to come up with recommendations on how that might play out and how that relationship would work.
Okay, while this is in my opinion, this is a really good thing to try to develop this area into something more than what it is. But my concern is that how are you going to get these property owners on board with it if it's going to cost them money to do this, or to maybe the city can provide some funds for it too. But other than that, I'm kind of a little bit wondering if we're spending this money for something that's not ever going to go anywhere, because the property owners may not be able to, be a part of it, or afford to be a part of it, So that's my only concern with it. That'd be my only reason for not being on board with it. So.
Yeah, through the chair, Commissioner Springer. I mean, I think that's the thing is right now, I think we don't really know. You can hazard some guesses about what the recommendations might come out of this, but I think that's sort of reasoning to do the study in many ways, in that knowing that for a lot of reasons, it's and I guess I'm putting a little bit of my opinion out there, is that that the waterfront is probably an asset to consider looking at it. But I think that's the thing that feasibility studies do is they explore it, they kind of ground it in some reality, as well as provide recommendations and a path on to move forward with those recommendations. But to know what those are going to be right now, I don't know, and I don't think anybody does. They're really, and so I guess here's the other thing too, is I've worked in similar types of projects and communities that have had a lot of public lands involved with the study, and certainly there's a certain element of a city or municipality being able to have more control over that development. But I've also worked on many of these where there weren't any public lands involved in it, but to I think create that conversation between private landowners and the municipality, I think can still really create a vision and a path forward for the community. And sometimes to even just have this kind of study and a vision and recommendations and action items on how to move forward can sometimes inject a certain amount of reassurance from a property owner to redevelop, knowing that there's support in the community, or there might be certain tools, or maybe there's certain zoning or something that was put together in order to support and encourage the redevelopment and the revitalization. So yeah, there's a lot of communities where it's all private lands, but the community is still able to put together a vision and a way forward to see some significant change in the community. And I guess I'll end on the fact that I don't think anybody knows what those puzzle pieces, if you will, are going to look like, and who's going to have what roles and responsibilities moving forward. I think that's what we need out of the study.
Commissioner Dothett.
Yes. So, oh,
You're out of time.
I didn't do it. No, I turned it on too many times. Yeah. I guess my only concern was with this, without already having, and I understand where it's like it's so much unknown, right? We're just trying to see if and what could be done with it, and then approach after that's been done, after the feasibility study. I can see approaching the landowners and saying, "Hey, this is what we think could be happening. Would you be interested in it?" My big concern that I would have, as far as several members of the community in this area, knowing that this is one of the last areas that has an active working cannery, and one of the only active working canneries left for the commercial fishermen that have boats to sell their fish at. I would think that some might take offense to us trying to eliminate a commerce section for them, because they could take this as saying that the city is anti-commercial fishing, because they're wanting to get rid of these commercial fishing boats, because they're just a sore eye to look at, and not taking into mind that that's the history of the community too. And this being one of the last areas that has a working cannery in it, I could see that almost coming to step on some people's toes. I mean, they're saying the feasibility, like, there's not a huge not a lot of money in that fishery right now. It's been kind of a downturn for it, and this might just be one more nail in the coffin that they're seeing. We're kind of, the city's trying to push them out that much more, and that would be my concern, is to tread easily on that, knowing that this area is the last kind of stronghold that they have left that's even producing for them. So that was my only concern.
Through the chair, Commissioner Douthat, and I would say, for the study, I think the study would be engaging stakeholders and property owners within the study itself, and not necessarily see what the study says and then start. Like I think even starting on August 4th was to start having that communication. I would say the other thing too is that's a part of the unknown of how future discussions and meetings and recommendations coming from a consultant team.
And that's just
I
like
think
one
that
of the
would
things
be
is right now we've had a lot of positive
Yeah.
feedback, but I could see
Sure.
that could be something that might come up as some people see as
Sure.
more of a negative, like, hey, why are we trying to get rid of all the canneries now? What are we going to do, kind of thing.
yeah.
So it might just be something to think about in this study.
Sure. Yeah.
Commissioner Greenberg.
So there's already in the Harbor Commission, there's a call for a harbor master plan. And that's something that's already in code and being asked for. I guess it would be a broader plan than this, but it kind of is the same thing. I wonder how this would differ from that, or how this could be sort of brought in to create that harbor master plan, instead of just being, because it sounds like what I'm hearing here is it really is focused on revitalizing something that might not want to get revitalized. Or that might be kind of insulting or something. But if you looked at it as like a harbor master plan, which is already something the city's supposed to do, maybe that would be broader and more inclusive to the needs of the commercial fishermen. And it's on the books, so anyway.
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Commissioner Greenberg. I'm not familiar with the harbor master plan, but is there is there a draft? Is there what? I guess what's the stage that's at?
It's supposed to be the document that guides the Harbor Commission,
Okay.
and it never existed.
Okay. All right.
Wow,
So I don't.
it's sunsetted, huh?
Well, the document never existed.
It never sunrise, yeah.
Okay.
So I just feel this seems like it's a piece of it, but that would be a more inclusive document that could, yeah, but that might be a more expensive study. So I don't know.
I'm not sure. I guess the other thing too is just not being familiar with what that harbor master plan should be and how it would function, but maybe consideration to how they might work together as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it seems like a logical, just to kind of look at the two, and to look at how it, how they could work together.
Yeah.
Maybe broaden this one out a little bit so it doesn't look so focused on a particular area and the canneries and all that, So just to be more inclusive.
Part of a consultant team, coming on to help create the plan with the community would be to. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was on. It was the opposite of what I thought it was. That if a consultant firm was to come on board to work on the feasibility study very early, we do a data transfer to them, so to share all those existing documents. And so I think that's an interesting thing to note, is that I'm sure there is actually other types of plans for consideration here beyond just, let's say, comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance, right? And so that would be a part of that data transfer, that we provide all those existing documents and GIS and things that the consultant would utilize in getting a understanding of the city of Kenai, as well as specifically in the study area. And so that's interesting. I think, but there isn't a plan.
Just the commission, I
Okay.
guess.
But anyway, sorry. So that idea of of other existing plans being incorporated in here is an aspect of this type of study that would be under consideration on how they'd all potentially work together.
Vice Chair Fikes.
I'd just like to say, I think I'm for it. I think it's a small investment for a large gain for everybody in the community. I think there's a lot of aspects that you can look at. I think you can take one or the other side on whether the commercial industry would be impacted or not, but that's the whole point of the study. You know, when somebody says a riverfront, you can think big development and tea shops and little T-shirts and hats, or you can go the other direction and you can think, you know, fishing and how's that going to impact our city and what kind of return on that investment. Well, we also need dorms sometimes and we need showers, and so I would think an impact study might tap into every one of these. And just something I saw this year at the borough level was a conversation about agricultural harvesting of kelp in the ocean and the whole industry that's opened up from that. So to hear an impact study that might touch on a lot of areas that we might not have even heard of, or, you know, to communicate for the historical aspect of it, is there anything that, you know, like you say, how can we move forward? So I'd like to say, I think it's a small investment for a huge gain to see which direction to go.
Anyone else? Oh, we'll get Commissioner Woodard.
I actually do. Is the riverfront area, is that like along the highway where you can build bike paths? So you would have the right to build a walkway that connected everything? You know, like a boardwalk kind of thing?
Through the chair, Commissioner Woodard, I think that idea of, again, I'm not terribly familiar about existing plans related to that type of multi-use path connectivity. I think there's some, with the planning, they call them sharrows, where there's arrows for biking here. I think I've seen that here. But I think that is something that would very likely be a consideration for this kind of study. It probably wouldn't get into too much detail, but it could be, and I'm just speaking hypothetically, it could end up being a recommendation to consider for a future action. And because the the existing right of way and connectivity to really the core downtown area of the city is just a few hundred yards away, I would think that would be some type of consideration for connectivity. And I think it's those types of ideas that could be kind of put out there and explored with the feasibility study as well.
Okay. My thought there was that if there was a walking path that went along the river that people started using, it would already start bringing interest to the river. But also, I was thinking about the cannery. There's commercial interests that are pretty much on all waterfronts that could be utilized as an educational, or you go and watch people bring their fish in when, like in Hawaii or something, and that's always fun. People might want to see fish coming off a tender or whatever. And then I had a question for Jim. I saw you talking with the woman the other day that does have that property that spoke at the workshop. Is that anything we can know about? Has she got plans of something going, whether anybody else does anything?
Well, yeah, the little bit I know about it is revealed in her public testimony. You were here at the meeting, okay, and that's what she is interested on. Her family has been invested in this town for over 60 years. They've built apartment buildings. They built this cannery. The family has built the Port of Anchorage. Okay, they built an apartment building in Anchorage along Minnesota Drive that withstood the '64 earthquake. Okay, and they've had this property for some time. She wants to leave a legacy for the family, and something positive that could happen with that property. And that would be, her desire. I think her testimony also said that she would perhaps like to see a public-private partnership with her property in the city. And there's the possibility of the walking path that you had mentioned could go from her property or others, but it'd be this seems to be at this end of the scheme seems to be the core property, could go from her property across where the city dock is to the tar box viewing station, and then have a trail going through the wetlands, which can be permitted if you have light penetrating walks, all the way to, if not to the bridge, at least to the area where we have the lookout and the glasses. It'd be a magnificent venue for bird watching. There's such an interest in that. I'm not a bird watcher, but I understand that people do, and I'm for that. And so this is kind of the ideas that she had. And other than that, it's it'll have to be revealed. But she has 20 acres right there, and a public-private partnership could work, or something else. It's just like looking through a kaleidoscope now. There's some things that are not known. But also, what has to happen is if we're going to have access to that river from these properties, we're going to have to dredge the harbor. Okay, and the Corps of Engineers can help us, and the group that's helping us with the bluff erosion can help us with that aspect of it. As the river gets wider, it gets shallower, and it's never been dredged. Okay, and so there could be funding available for that. The Nelchik gets dredged. Okay, Seward has public monies. Homer, Gary knows of places down the chain where it's a riverine harbor that gets money to dredge so that boats and ships can use that waterway. So it's a very, very inclusive approach that I envision as well, I'm a projects planner, so I kind of have an idea of what we can look at. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Commissioner Doffett.
The bike path that we just talked about that's going to connect to Beaver Loop, which side of the road is that coming on? I can't remember. Is it on the side of the road? It's on the AIH side? Okay. I was just thinking it would have been more inclusive to be on the...
It's the money.
Yep.
It's cheaper to go on the AIH side.
Yep. Okay. That's what I was just curious. I couldn't remember which side of the road that was going on.
Follow-up from Commissioner Halstead.
Just a question, when I'm looking at the funds that are in here, it's like, it looks like $75,000 with a potential $20,000 contingency. Is there a possibility of getting outside funding sources for that, or grants, or state money that would assist with that expense?
Through the chair, Commissioner Halstead, I don't know. I would say what is being put forth would not consider, wouldn't be in consideration of getting funds from outside what's being requested in the ordinance.
None of that $5 trillion infrastructure money can be used for it. Okay, so we can just rubber stamp approval of this, but we're not looking for input as far as what items we'd like to see in the RFP or things like that. Is that going to be part of the public hearing process, or how is that going to, and then council will compile all that and staff and figure it out that way as far as the bumpers and what we want to see out of a feasibility study?
Chair Twait, that's correct. On September 1st, for the public hearing, there will be a draft RFP, which also has the scope of services in there. So that would be under consideration for the council meeting.
Okay. Anything else? Or are we ready to take a vote? All right. Let's call the roll, please.
Commissioner Halsted,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard,
Yes?
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Douthat,
Yes.
Commissioner Springer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fikes,
Yes.
Chair Twait,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right. What's that? We can take a break? We can take a break. All right, we are back on the record, and starting with item I, pending items we have none, takes us to reports. J1, City Council, Councilman Glenn Denning.
Thank you, Chairman Twait. On August 18th, the City Council met in Chambers, and we had some public hearings. We passed unanimously an ordinance increasing the fiscal year 2021 estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund for the police department, accepting a grant from Alaska High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area for drug investigation overtime expenditures. We also passed unanimously an ordinance accepting and appropriating a grant from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security passed through the State of Alaska Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the fund for fire department and authorizing sole source of portable radios and accessories for the fire department. We passed unanimously an ordinance increasing the estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport fund, terminal repair, and maintenance department for expenditures in excess of budget amounts due to damage to a terminal siding and authorizing a purchase order to Blasey Construction. We passed unanimously an ordinance accepting a grant from the FAA and increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport snow removal equipment project fund. We passed unanimously an ordinance increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund fire department for the purchase of extraction equipment needed to provide emergency response to motor vehicle accidents, and that would be the operative term or visual would be the jaws of life that is used for automobile accidents to extract humans and people from the accident, from the damaged car. Ordinance passed unanimously, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the COVID-19 CARES Act Recovery Fund for a federal CARES Act grant passed through the State of Alaska Department of Public Safety for overtime and direct expenditures of the police, fire, and communication departments in the city. Passed unanimously an ordinance increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund for the Kenai Fine Arts Center capital project and amending the lease for a portion of the original town site for the Kenai Fine Arts Center to provide additional funding for improvements and modifications and modifications amendment to the lease for the Kenai Fine Arts Center. We passed unanimously a resolution adopting joint resolution of the Assembly and Kenai Peninsula Borough and councils of the city of the Kenai Peninsula Borough supporting requests for federal aid submitted by the Kenai Peninsula Borough to Alaska's U.S. Congressional delegation for the purpose of spruce bark beetle mitigation. And we passed unanimously a resolution approving development incentives for the Kenai Municipal Code 2110-100 for a lease of airport reserve lands between the city of Kenai and Schilling Rentals. And let's see, what did we do here? We action approval item, we authorized a special use permit for Boys and Girls Club of the Kenai Peninsula for use of office space building at the Beacon Building. And we had authorized a letter of support for the Kenaitze Indian Tribe grant request for a pilot fixed route transportation program. And we approved a study for a potential partnership with the city of Soldotna to provide 911 dispatch services. And that was it. We have a pending item. It's a ordinance 3224-2021 repealing and enacting municipal code Title VI elections to provide clarity, housekeeping, and process improvements, sponsored by our clerk and Vice Mayor Malloy. And that ends my report. Thank you.
Any questions? Commissioner Halstead.
Quick question on that last item, partnership with the city of Soldotna to provide 911 dispatch services. Is that for Kenai to provide 911 services to Soldotna, or Soldotna to, with us, or a joint revenue? Are we keeping our dispatch center?
Yeah, the idea is it would come this way. Okay, and it would be for police only. Soldotna is already tied in with the CES. Okay, and there's, I don't know, there's agreements where we share services. Let's see what a little bit. If something comes in on a cell phone, okay, it winds up over in Soldotna before it comes to here. Say if it involves something in Kenai, if the request comes in on a landline, it comes directly to our dispatch. So that's something that we would be looking at. But at least from my perspective, the idea that the 911 dispatch would come from our end is that we have a very complex city. We have harbor with the safety issues there. We have an airport that is very, very complex, and we have requirements from the FAA for fire protection. We have a large area for many square miles. Many square miles for police to cover, and then there's even though the prison's not in our town, it's right on the edge and impacts us also. So I think it's a good idea to look at it. I think there was a movement, as I understand it, from the state to consolidate dispatch. They bring everything up to Palmer to include the peninsula, et cetera, okay? And that's a non-starter with us. We need local knowledge, and with that comes local control, local understanding, and a quick response dedicated to the citizens of this town. Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. J2, Borough Planning, Vice Chair Fikes.
Let's see what we got. August 23rd, we had our meeting, and let's see, we were meeting in chambers still. And we had a right-of-way vacation in the Black Gold Estate subdivision, I believe, and that was a yes for that. And then we had a conditional use permit resolution, and that was in the Poacher's Cove, and there was quite a bit of comment on that. If those folks that are familiar with Poacher's Cove, the planned little development on the river, and there was a gentleman that wanted to take his trailer and put a permanent structure, if you will, and so there was some discussion on the language in the code when it said that he was hooked up to water and sewer. Obviously, if it's an actual RV from way back in the day that's been parked there, does that consider hookup, and is that gonna classify as code? At the end of the day, it was a yes, and so he could take that old trailer, pull it off of there, put a permanent structure. And so there was a little discussion and a little agitation from some of his neighbors, because they felt that, you know, he was gonna be encroaching in the 50-foot setback on one corner of his property, and so that's why there was quite a bit of discussion at that level as far as, is it a permanent structure, is it a temporary structure, is he grandfathered in, is he not grandfathered in, and, you know, it's already tight quarters in that area anyway, so he wasn't necessarily increasing anything. It was like, I think, 35-foot trailer or something, so he wasn't going beyond that. But his buffers, when he did the permanent structure, his easements had to be so much this way and so much that way, and so that was when the discussion kind of got in. But we ultimately approved that one. And then there was an ordinance authorizing a lease to Robert Gibson, Alaska Land and Cattle Company, for approximately 2 acres, and that was borough land to be in the Sargent Road area for agricultural use. And so that stayed the same. That was before us before. They were just asking for some clarification, and so that's gonna move on to the assembly for approval. And then we had a resolution establishing the appeal procedure for appeal of the planning director's decision approving a non-conforming use application within the C&H Estates LOZD. And the LOZ is a local operating zone oh my gosh, I can't even think right now. Local ordinance zoning district, thank you. And so there was some couple factors. There was a change of administration during a applicant's consideration of a change to his property. He had a conditional use. He was looking to change some of that. Some of his neighbors weren't okay with it, and then all of a sudden we had some changes in the administration. Now we have new administration, and so this has been back and forth, and so at the end of the day, the discussion came up that, you know what, there's really nothing in code that says what is the procedure. Code just says that you can appeal the decision, but how do you appeal the decision? So we got to look at it not once, not twice, 3 times to figure out how to go about to appeal that procedure. So we got that resolved, and then we had a discussion on our land sale. And that brings me back to a lot of the changes I mentioned. Like I say, the River Center's had some folks that have come in and settled in place. The planning director and some of the other folks in the administration at the borough level have settled in. And one of the results out of that, I guess, is what you could say is we had a hugely successful land sale auction this year that pulled in, I think it was like $650,000. It was one of the biggest sales I guess they've had. So they had some really good feedback. I don't know if that had anything to do with the fact that we've got new people in there, if there was some new marketing or what, but that was a positive that came out of it. And then let's see, what else do we have? There was some director's comments on a community wildfire protection plan update that's coming out. And that was it. Yeah.
All right, any questions? All right, thank you much. J3 City Administration, Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Chair Twait, fellow commissioners. Just a few items of note. We don't have any items for the September 8th meeting. The cutoff was today, so we haven't received any items. We do have one item slated for the September 22nd meeting. And I did want to note, many of you know this already, but the September 22nd Planning and Zoning meeting, that will be Willie's last meeting, as Willie is retiring.
Really?
Yes, so that's you know, that's a big deal. You know, I have worked with.
Did I miss the invitation?
Yeah, I've worked with Willie briefly, but you know, she's definitely going to be missed. She's wonderful person to work with, as well as just being very knowledgeable and hardworking, and certainly, you know, also being able to provide that sort of institutional knowledge, having worked for the city for several years. So we do have the position posted currently. I think it's maybe been about a week or so that the position's been posted for. So right about the same time we were publishing the packet for tonight's meeting, we did receive the BOA decisions for Dolchek. So what I was going to do is I was going to just provide those as informational items on the next meeting packet that we have. We did receive notification, I think it was maybe today or yesterday, from the borough regarding the Black Gold subdivision that came through the Planning and Zoning Commission for that right-of-way vacation. So I will be putting that together to send to council for the September 15th meeting. So just a heads up there. And that's everything I have.
Any questions? All right. Thank. Additional public comments. Mr. Malloy. Councilman Malloy.
Thank you, Chair Tway. Evening, Commissioners. Bob Malloy, 513 Ash Avenue, Kenai, and it's my residence address. Had two purposes coming tonight. One was to hear your discussion about the feasibility study, so thank you for that. Second purpose is to let you know about an ordinance that I've been working on with the planning director, city attorney, and city clerk that if it's going to be introduced September 1, and so it would come to you and it would give you a reason to have a meeting September 8th if the council agrees. And what it is, it's about amending KMC 142150 conditional use permits to clarify the roles and responsibilities of applicants, the planning director, and the planning commission. And so there was a lot of discussion that council had, in executive session when we were dealing with the Board of Adjustments and looking at comments that the commissions had made during the hearings over, a period of time and stuff. And so, we had discussed some issues, and so I mentioned to the city attorney that, there's some issues here, and he said that, well, the planning director and him had spotted some issues, and they were talking about maybe some clarifications or saying things expressly in the code that are kind of like practice. And I said, well, I'm going to be termed out in October, so I'd be happy to sponsor that, And so I just wanted to give you a hey, it'd be my last piece of legislation, and I wanted to just give you a heads up about it. It'll be on the agenda to be discussed for introduction. It's not going to be a consent deal, but they'll be doing stuff like adding a sentence to paragraph A intent to clarify and state that you have the discretion to grant, deny, modify, or revoke a conditional use permit. One of the things that the planner wanted that the planning director, because we upgraded the position, that I think is a really good idea is add a new paragraph B on pre-application meeting. This would require the applicant to have a pre-application meeting with the planning director or designee to ensure that the application is complete and the applicant is familiar with the conditional use permit public hearing process. And the review by the planning director is really to determine that sufficient information is going to be presented with the application to allow the commission a meaningful review. The review by the planning director will have no bearing on whether an application should be granted or not. It's kind of like a helpful, tend to be a helpful thing. There was going to be some minor changes to the paragraph on applications, regarding the content of applications, to, be consistent with the online form for the application and the practice that we have. We're going to propose to add to the paragraph on public hearings the requirement that the applicant or representative be present in person or by some kind of remote electronic technology like telephone even, to present the application and their case to the commission. And we're going to add, they've always had a burden of proof, but we're proposing to add a burden of proof paragraphs that's simple, that would clarify and state that the applicant has the burden of proof to show that the 6 review criteria are satisfied and the application should be granted. And we're going to propose to add a paragraph on staff report that would clarify and state that the planning director or designee will provide a staff report. The staff report, as is the practice, may include a recommendation and proposed findings on whether the requirements of the code have been satisfied, whether any specific additional conditions are recommended. It'll also say that the commission may consider the recommendations of the planning director or designate, but does not have to defer to the recommendations, and that the staff report doesn't relieve the applicant, of making their case to the commission. The only thing that's a proposed change to the criteria themselves or the conditions is that, that the value, the number 2, that's the value of the adjoining property and neighborhood will not be significantly impaired, that you would consider non-economic as well as economic value. And so that's basically it. It's just to put out a lot of things that sort of practice clarifies some things that aren't clear to applicants, and maybe have a better front end process with a pre-application meeting, you know, to help applicants understand what they need to do and what information they need to provide. You know, again, that will be a negotiation with the planning director and the applicant, and you know, if the applicant's unhappy with what the director's review is, you know, they can go to the manager, but it wouldn't involve like a total rejection. You know, again, that's and isn't supposed to be on the merits. It's to help them put together the you know, the information that they need to make your review of their application you know, meaningful review. Thanks.
Anyone have any questions? Vice Chair Fikes?
So can you read that last part again?
The what?
Just the very last line where you said part 2. Can you read that over again?
Part 2. Okay, so you mean about the review?
Yeah.
Okay, so the review by the planning director is to determine that sufficient information is being presented with the application.
No, that wasn't it. No.
Oh, the criteria.
Well, you were talking about economic impact of those on the surrounding properties in addition. Item two.
Yeah.
Item 2.
Right now, it says the value, something like the value of the adjoining property in the neighborhood will not be significantly impaired. So we're just going to say the economic and non-economic value. You know, so you would consider, you could consider both, because there was a lot of testimony and some of your comments relating to, you know, like value that in neighborhoods or the public comment that didn't have to do specifically with a price, but had to do more like with non-economic factors.
Sure, what I hear is quality of life or
Yeah.
harmony of a neighborhood, but as an applicant, how would I quantify that? So I'm applying to the city for a conditional use permit for such function, this, that, or the other. How would I sit down and quantify that? So you're saying economic impact, and so I could say, okay, well, this is gonna negatively impact it if I do this financially.
So-
But how would you quantify that? And I understand where you're coming from, because yes, we certainly get that feedback. You know, marijuana is gonna go in my neighborhood, I don't want it. You know, but how do you say that it's not going to impact it economically? I mean,
So I think that has to do with whether it fits in or doesn't fit in with the character of the neighborhood. You know, so there would be factors like, you know, there's trails through the neighborhood that the people use that are you know, that are part of their enjoyment of their neighborhood, or other things that have to do with their enjoyment of their neighborhood. This proposal, you know, the use that we want to have doesn't negatively impact, you know, isn't going to negatively impact private property values, or isn't going to negatively impact anything else that neighbors are concerned about in the area.
I'd just be worried that it's subjective, so the applicant would say, I don't think so, but then the neighbors would say, yes, I do. So I don't see where the teeth are in the proposal.
And yeah, I get that, and a lot of what you have to deal with is subjective. I totally recognize that, especially like when you have stuff like harmony with the comprehensive plan. You know, that's always subjective, because there's different parts of of the plan, and you kind of have to balance it. You know, you're right, you can't put a dollar value. It's easy to put a dollar value on the economic part. It isn't easy on the other. You know, you may find that one is helpful or is not helpful. You know, one weighs more with you than another in a particular situation. You know, because as you know, all the properties are unique, all the neighborhoods are different, and all the proposals and projects are different. So not all the factors carry the same weight with you when you're looking at a particular situation, you know, a particular proposal. So you would make findings on all of them, and some of them are easy and some of them are more difficult, you know, and that's, you know, what I've seen your experience would be, but
Yeah, I'd just be thrilled the fact that they're present, available, and willing to answer the questions and not absent and never around.
right. And so, Commissioner, Vice Chair Fikes, so if this ordinance does get sent to you, you'll have the opportunity, you know, again, to make those comments, and you know, you may have some recommendations, you know, for the council to consider. And certainly, I'll come here and hear your discussion too.
Good. Commissioner Dothett.
I see the corrections. Now, I don't have it in front of me, the KMC, but is there anything that's going to make it clarify the abilities or termination of the actual permit? Like later, we've had a lot of that where like we didn't know about violations or complaints about something. Is there something in there that's going to like a tier system, like X number of complaints, then it's going to come, it could come before the committee earlier, or that it says when we're going to review it based on, we're going to hear complaints on that for revocation of these, or?
So the modification and revocation, Commissioner Douthat, is part of the same ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're not addressing that at all.
Okay.
So yes, you're right. You know, the administration can bring, you know, a revocation action to the commission or a suspension action, you know, if conditions are not being complied with. It's been rare. You know, I haven't seen that happen often. It has happened. And the only, we didn't want to delve too deeply into the criteria either. You know, that was the only thing that we were thinking of in our discussion, because again, that's a lot bigger subject than what this ordinance is trying to achieve. You know, that would take a lot longer time. You're right. There's some other stuff that's really subjective and vague, but you know, this ordinance isn't really attempting to you know, get too far into the criteria.
Anyone else? Very good. Thank you. Greatly appreciated. Okay. No one else out there for additional public comments, so we'll move on to informational items, which we have none. Our next meeting is the 8th, potentially. Looks like we probably will. Commissioners' comments and questions. Actually, you know, if I can step back to something I guess I could have asked Mr. Foster. It brought my attention when we started talking about revocations. You'd mentioned that there was one conditional use permit that was being looked at as far as in some violations. Have we haven't got any update on that, or as far as any future or ongoing works on that?
Chair Choi, yeah, I can keep. That's actually a good reminder. I can keep the commission informed on the status of that. I will say that I have sent out a notice of violation for that same property, and so the time period to mitigate that on the property owner is currently underway. It was 60 days provided to correct the violation for the conditional use permit. It was stated that there is that potentiality of a revocation hearing if it's unable to be resolved. That letter went out maybe a week or so ago. So I don't have the exact date now, but what I can do is at the next meeting I can update the commission on that. So 60 days, that would be I guess an October deadline for the property owner and conditional use permit holder to address and comply.
Is this the same property that we've had on Angler Drive with multiple issues that we're still talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Commissioners' comments and questions. Commissioner Woodard.
I have none.
Commissioner Dothett.
I will be out of town on the 22nd meeting. September 22nd, I won't be here.
You'll have to bring your own special gift to Willie at some other time then.
Bring her some moose meat, hopefully.
Commissioner Halsted.
I just really enjoy the opportunity to work with this Kenai Waterfront Revitalization feasibility project. I think it's a tremendous amount of work, but I think we definitely have the right planning director for the job. So I'm very confident that you will do amazing with it, and we look forward to getting that project underway and moving forward with it. So thank you for assisting.
Very good. Commissioner Greenberg.
Yeah, I agree. It looks like a great project.
Commissioner Springer.
I don't have anything to add.
Vice Chair Fikes.
All good.
All right, and Councilman Glendenning.
Yeah, just one comment in support of the discussion I heard tonight. It was broad, but you asked pertinent questions, and also was reminded that in code we have provision for a harbor master plan, and this waterfront revitalization would fit right into that code. And I urge that the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then by extension the Harbor Commission, be intimately involved in every aspect, jot and jittle of this project, because it touches their responsibilities. And if Planning and Zoning and Harbor have good questions and good information, then I don't have to work so hard. Okay? And I appreciate your input and sincerity, and thank you.
Now, with all the business complete, the meeting is adjourned.